I've started passing some things around. Go ahead and look at those. One is called Vision. It's a publication that was done about one of our seminars that I work with in Germany and Leipzig and Berlin. And it tells basically what we do. Two of our students were in that seminar. I was one of the faculty members on that. And the other thing is that these folders, that also some of the Leipzig, it's just various things that we did, so to give you an idea of the various things that we subjected these people to, and just one of the things. But I want to go ahead and get started immediately. First of all, let me warn you, this program may be in violation of South Carolina state law, which says you cannot hunt by the aid of baiting on or over any baited area which you know, or even should know that the area has been baited. Baiting is the direct or indirect placing, exposing, depositing, distributing, or scattering of salt, grain, feed that could lure or attract any game over areas where hunters are attempting to take them. A baited area is which with salt, grain, or other feed has been placed, exposed, deposited, distributed, or scattered if that salt, grain, or feed can serve as a lure attraction of game. So we're using a baited field here. Gotcha. I'm going to look inside two German academies that I work with and what merits it has for South Carolina. One is the Atlantic Academy, Academy in Kaiserslautern, where I spent my sabbatical, and the other is the Pfalz Academy in Leipzig. Now, like our good old friend Hegel, I also have 4 questions. Actually, Kant was the guy. First is, what is a German academy from historical and modern perspectives? Second, with which 2 academies was I involved and how did I begin a connection with them? 3, what was or is my involvement with each of the academies? And then the last question, what does this involvement mean to education in South Carolina and at FMU? So the first question, what is a German academy from historical and modern perspectives? L'Académie Française, based on the Académie de Pruska, founded in 1582, was established by Cardinal Richelieu under Louis XIII, and is perhaps the best known of the typical European academies. Its 40 immortals are elected for life and are charged primarily with maintaining oversight of the French language and culture. Members can be removed only for misconduct, as was Marshal Philippe Pétain in 1945. Remember, he was the head of the Vichy government, although he was the field marshal for the French forces of World War I. In Germany, we have the example of the Akademie der Künste, Academy of the Arts, and the Preußische Akademie der Wissenschaften, which is the Prussian Academy of Sciences, founded at the end of the 17th and the beginning of the 18th centuries, respectively. The Academy of Sciences in Berlin, whose members include the likes of Immanuel Kant, Voltaire, Max Planck, and Albert Einstein. What all of these academies have in common is that they were founded by and for academicians who serve the purposes of the state. In all fairness, however, we must state that, to the contrary of popular belief, the proclamations of l'Académie Française are today advisory in nature, not binding. The academies that I'm connected with are quite different in nature. These form part of a national system within the Federal Republic of Germany. Each Land, or state in the Federal Republic of Germany, has what is called a Landeszentrale für politische Bildung, roughly translated as State Center for Political Education. Wow. As someone who grew up in the Cold War era, whenever I read or hear something akin to political education, I envision Soviet indoctrination, or as someone reasonably well acquainted with German history, I envision something perhaps even more sinister. However, a better translation for politische Bildung, at least in this case, would be civic education. That is, educating the public in the history, function, and most importantly, in the participation and the political process within a modern democratic society. For example, the mission statement for the Landeszentrale für politische Bildung Rheinland-Pfalz reads as follows. This is to prove that I'm not misquoting. Establishing and promoting civic education is the goal of the State Center for Civic Education of the Rheinland-Pfalz, which can look back on a long history. Under the direction of the Ministry for Education, Science, Continuing Education, and Culture, since 1993, the SCCE has been a nonpartisan and pan-partisan entity of the state government of Rheinland-Pfalz. It serves to inform the citizenry about the basis and current developments in politics, as well as for the education of the democratic consciousness. School children are currently learning about the political system in their nation, as well as understanding its history and recognizing their potential in its further development. As such, they receive the opportunity for this in activities such as student parliamentary contests, seminars, and visiting concentration camp memorials, which offer comprehensive pedagogical merit. Additionally, in-house and other publications which are available through the SCCE, and presentations dealing with various topics within civic education for adults as well, provide for the broader horizons. The library of the SCCE, with books and pamphlets on topics ranging from politics to culture, is at the disposal free of charge for all citizens of Rheinland-Pfalz, either on-site or for checkout. That's my translation of the mission statement. So you see what an academy is. It's there as a civic organization, not as a political organization. It's not deemed to, or its mission is not to try to convince someone that they should think in this way, vote in this way, or act politically in the modern sense in any way, but rather to become informed. So, the answer to our first question is this. These modern academies have been established and are being maintained for the general citizenry of each state. The purpose of the academies is not to indoctrinate, as was, for example, the Hitler Youth Movement of the 1930s, but rather to provide literature, presentations, and dialogue to the general public, from school children to adults in the general population. It is true that the government of each state provides funding for these locations, personnel, and activities for each academy, but the programs are developed by the leadership of the academy. In the case of Pfalz Academy in Leipzig is Mr. Martin Kaiser, a U.S. educated political scientist, and in the case of the Atlantic Academy, it is the team of Mr. Wolfgang Königsmann, the General Director of the Academy, and Dr. David Sirikoff, the Director of Studies. So this brings us down to question 2. With which 2 academies was I involved, and how did I begin a connection with them? The state of South Carolina and the state of Rheinland-Pfalz have had an official partnership since 1997, when Governor David Beasley and the Minister President Kurt Beck signed an official agreement establishing a condition of sisterhood, state sisterhood. And this is, of course, the Wappen, the seal. That's a seal of South Carolina's. Of course, this is the one of Rheinland-Pfalz. And they signed this agreement, and it was supposed to be in the area of education, science, research, and economy. In the spring of '97, Minister President Kurt Beck visited South Carolina, signed a mutual agreement of cooperation with then Governor David Beasley on May the 1st, 1997, in the capital city of Columbia, of course. Well, let's take a little South Carolina Rheinland-Pfalz quiz over here. Okay, first question. Which state, and we're calling Rheinland-Pfalz for this sector, which state is larger? Rheinland-Pfalz or South Carolina? How many of you think that South Carolina is larger than Rheinland-Pfalz? How many of you think that Rheinland-Pfalz is larger than South Carolina? How many of you aren't sure? And how many don't give a rat's? That's what I ask my students, and they're multiple. South Carolina is almost 4 times as large as Rheinland. You could almost put 4 Rheinland-Pfalz inside of South Carolina. Yes. Which state has the larger population? How many think South Carolina has a larger population? How many think Rheinland-Pfalz has a larger population? How many are sure? And move on. Question. South Carolina and Rheinland-Pfalz are very close in population. Actually, South Carolina has a wee bit more, about maybe a couple 100,000, but between 4 and 5 million packed into these states. Of course, we have 4 times as much place to put them. Which state is older? Is Rheinland-Pfalz older or South Carolina? How many think Rheinland-Pfalz is older than South Carolina? How many think that South Carolina is older than Rheinland-Pfalz? How many aren't sure? And how many don't give that? Okay, right? Actually, South Carolina was one of the 13 original colonies. Rheinland-Pfalz was formed by the government of the French occupying forces following World War II, so it's a relatively young state. Which is older, Germany or the United States of America? How many think the United States of America is older than Germany? How many think Germany's older? How many are sure? How many think this is a trick question? German word for trick question is Fallfrage, which means trap question. Trap question. Actually, the United States is as 1776. The modern state of Germany, of course, is from 1870, 1871, Bismarck, and then finally, I guess. But then, what has been called Germany by the things that's been around, of course, is the Middle Ages. Although the Middle Ages, about 5,000, what we would call countries now occupied what is roughly Germany, Poland, Austria, that area, Switzerland. By the end of the Middle Ages, it was down to about 500. So. Who is the president, Minister President of Rheinland-Pfalz? Anybody know? Same thing as the governor here. Kurt Beck is still the head of state in Rheinland-Pfalz. As long as you can get elected, you can stay there. Thank God that doesn't work in South Carolina. And so, I don't know how much we could put up with Mark Sanford. By the way, I was in Kaiserslautern when the news broke. My wife and I got up that morning, turned on CNN, and the thing about, it's 11 o'clock, do you know where your governor is? And then we talked about this, and we said, wow. So I went and I told the guy who's working for at the Atlantic Academy, I said, Bernard, did you hear the news on television? He said, no, and I told him about that, and he paused a moment, he said in English, don't cry for me, Argentina. I said, what's the capital of Rheinland-Pfalz? You've been there, what is it? Mainz. Mainz, it certainly is. Mainz is the capital of Rheinland-Pfalz. So now we know a wee bit more about it. My job, when I go there, one of them, and I'll talk about this a little bit, is presenting workshops on South Carolina. And it's anywhere from a 2 to a 4 hour workshop. And it deals with politics, deals with history, it deals with geography and Southern culture. They even get to find out what kudzu is. How about Rheinland-Pfalz, the Rhineland-Palatinate? Well, here it is. Boing. This is the state, or das Land of Rheinland-Pfalz, which is right here. Does anybody know, if you take the whole country of the Federal Republic of Germany, what state is it about the size of the United States? Anybody know? What is it? Oregon? Oregon or Montana? Oregon and Montana are the two closest states. So it's relatively small, but if you try traveling across and find out. Right here is Kaiserslautern. That's where the Atlantic Academy is, and the Pfalz Academy is in Landgleich, which is very small. It's in the Bad Dürkheim area of Germany. And so this is the part, I spent my sabbatical right about there in Germany when I was there for the most part, of course. Except for 1 week when we were traveling around the honors kids there. Which two academies? The state of South Carolina and the state of Rheinland-Pfalz have these, and it's set up. The two academies with which I've been working over the past several years are located in the German Land, or state, as we would call it, the Rheinland-Palatinate, or as I prefer to call it, Rheinland-Pfalz. The one that I've had the longest association with is the Atlantic Academy, the Atlantic Academy, headquartered in Kaiserslautern, Rheinland-Pfalz. This top part of the building, this whole area right through here, is the Atlantic Academy. It's provided by the state of Rheinland-Pfalz to them free of charge. This used to be a court building, and so they have the former courthouse. A huge, huge room that we can use for presentations. That's where the library is located, etc. When I was there, I was working mostly outside of these windows right here. And I had a small apartment that they provided for me about 4 blocks away, so it was really very, very nice living conditions there. The founding director of the Atlantic, by the way, this is the City Hall, 20-something stories high. It's right across the street from the Atlantic Academy. The founding director was Dr. Werner Kremp. He's the one that actually contacted me. And then today it's Mr. Wolfgang Tönsmann. He's the one I worked with directly during my sabbatical. And the Studienleiter, the director of studies, is Dr. David Sirkoff, who is a professor of political science at the Technical University there in Kaiserslautern. And in 2008, I enjoyed an ongoing cooperative program with the Pfalz Academy in Landgleich, also in Rheinland-Pfalz. And this is is the Florence Academy. This is an air photo of it. That's the dorm area. These are the classroom areas. This is another classroom complex with also their bar and their restaurant. And that's the administrative wing, another side. And this is from the mountainside called the Teufelstes in the Devil's Rock where you overlook London. As you can see, it looks very much like South Carolina up in the north part of the state. So our geography in some ways also is quite similar. But how did this all begin? Got a minute? In 2005, Ms. Patricia Hartung, member of the Board of Trustees of Francis Marion University, contacted Dr. Carter, president of FEU, to inform him that the Atlantic Academy in Kaiserslautern in Rheinland-Pfalz, Germany, wished to present a series of workshops in South Carolina, developed and led by a local expert, so that the students in various university preparatory schools, or gymnasium, in Rheinland-Pfalz would be familiar with essential topics and facts about our Partnerstadt. President Carter called me and asked me to consider this task, which I accepted with the greatest of enthusiasm, of course, and thus began my official connection with the Atlantic Academy. Following a brief mail correspondence with Dr. Van Kuhn here, this gentleman over here, who at the time was serving as the director of the Atlantic Academy, it was decided that the workshops should contain units on the history, geography, and culture of South Carolina and Southern culture in general, and that they should be delivered in the English language since the majority of the participants were in an upper-level English course system. The first workshop on South Carolina took place on June 13, 2005 at the Florence Academy in Landwehr, with 36 participants, including faculty. In the next 2 weeks, I conducted 9 other workshops. The project was evaluated as very successful, and in the following years, such workshops were presented in a similar format. One venue for these workshops was the Florence Academy in Landwehr. While I was there in the first year, Mr. Kaiser approached me about working with the international groups dealing with projects of modern democracy in Europe and the Middle East. In the first 2 years, this was not feasible for one reason or another. However, in the summer of 2008, I traveled with 6 students from Francis Marion University Landwehr to participate in the first seminar of this type. Strong support from the faculty in history and political science departments here at FMU made it possible for our students to receive 3 credit hours in either political science or history. Thus began my ongoing cooperation with a second academy. Since 2010, Villanova University has joined FMU as a, quote, supplier of American participants for this annual seminar. If that magazine that I passed around Vision, if you turn around on the back, you see the institutions that is supporting it, and one is Villanova and the other is Francis Marion University, the only 2 American universities that are involved in this directive. So this brings us to the third question: what was and is my involvement with each of these academies? Initially, my involvement with the Atlantic Academy in Kaiserslautern was centered around the workshops in South Carolina. These proved to be very successful and attracted a lot of attention from area teachers. The original workshops, which lasted from 2 to 4 hours depending on travel time, class size, etc., were offered in 2 locations in Rheinland-Pfalz. 1 week at the Florence Academy in Landwehr, and a second week in Ingelheim am Rhein at the Friedhof Nansen Academy, also called the Weiterbildungszentrum, this continuing education center there. Let me provide an example of a portion of the workshop on South Carolina history for you. Okay. Here's one. You are the students sitting in the workshop, and we've gone through some slides, we talked about it, and we worked our way, we're starting to talk about colonization. So this is how I would present part of this. We've talked about the Spaniards, how they came, were in the Barrier Islands, left, didn't come, and we haven't gotten to the English yet, who have finally stayed and hanged. But I'm talking about the French at this point. So I pull up this slide. It's in, I think there are 46 slides in this series that I'm doing in history. And it says, in May 1562, Jean Ribault, the leading group of French Protestants, the Huguenots, by the way, the French word Huguenot, is a corruption of the German word Eidgenossen, which means people who took the same oath. They landed on what is now Paris Island, near Charleston. Ribault returned to France, promising to send more colonists, but he did not. The French abandoned the colony, and in a ship of their own construction attempted to sail to France, but had to be rescued by an English ship. At this time I say, here's Jean Ribault.
Ladies and gentlemen of the colony, please give me your attention. I am going back to the France. I am going to get some more colonists, and I'm bringing back to you. You stay here. I'm going pick up.
sailed away. He didn't come back. They caught him out there.
Hey, Sean, I don't think he's coming back. I don't think he's coming back either. What are we going to do? We'll build a ship. We'll sail back to La Belle France.
Well, colonists, they weren't the greatest of, and shipbuilders, they weren't the greatest of either. So they built the ship, and they're about halfway across the ocean, and
Oh, merde. Il y a l'eau dans le bateau. There's water in the boat. Water in the boat. What are we going to do?
well, there happened to be an English ship passing by. Hey, look over there.
It's the French. They got a name.
And it's sinking. Should we help them? No, they're the French. Yes, but they can cook. We can't. So they help them. This is an example of the types of things. I try to incorporate something that will give them a feeling for what the American spirit is and how we sort of look at things. Of course, the Germans, they love anything that you can do about that. So since 2010, I've been traveling from Kaiserslautern to area schools in order to present these workshops. This has taken me as far north as Westerburg and Bad Neuenahr to Mainz and Neustadt an der Weinstraße. If we look, this is also Rheinland-Pfalz. Here is Kaiserslautern. Here is Landau, for example. I presented one there. Neustadt an der Weinstraße. Bad Neuenahr up here. Ida Oberstein, Westerburg is up here. I presented a couple in Mainz. This was just during my, in 1 week I went to all these places. 1 week and 2 days. I went to all these places to present these workshops on South Carolina while I was there. With the Palmetto Academy, I participated as a team member for the faculty in 4 seminars based on democracy and citizen action in West Berlin. These seminars are actually 2 programs in one. The first deals with Americans and Germans who are university students. For example, the 2010 seminar was entitled "The Time to Build New Bridges." This title was taken from a quote from Barack Obama's speech in Berlin in 2008, and the topic centered on relationships between the U.S. and the Federal Republic of Germany. This program was integrated into a second program entitled "Make a Difference: History and Democratic Involvement in Intercultural Dialogue." Participants with this program included not only the German and American participants, but students and student leaders from Northern Ireland, Lithuania, and Poland. These seminars are conducted in English and are not typical for an American university classroom. They are typical for the sort of hands-on activities that modern German academies offer. Instead of lectures, students work in both international and national groups. For example, each national group chose another national group to work with. On a very large piece of paper, the first 2 groups drew symbols. Text was not allowed, defining their impressions and understanding of the second country. Then the second group was given the opportunity to respond on the other side of the paper with their impressions about their own country. If you have that Vision magazine, if you look on page 9, for example, you would see an example of one of those things that has the symbols. And it's pretty interesting to see what people think about it. One year they said, okay, we had a group from Hungary. I think it's the second year I was working with this group. And so they said, well, we're going to, who's going to take Hungary? And I said, the United States would be glad to take Hungary. And they said, well, maybe, because see, they didn't think the Americans would know anything about it. And I knew our group, our Francis Marion kids, the kids from Villanova, we wanted to show them, no, we weren't, they wanted to give us something that was obvious. I said, no, we'll do Hungary. And they had the chain bridge, they had Budapest, the 2 things, the light bulb, the invention of the ballpoint pen, the Rubik's Cube, the Magyars, also with the food, you know, the paprika and all that kind of stuff, the other things. And it was very surprising because it opened the eyes of the European kids who thought that we're still isolationists pretty much. And we're very parochial, especially people from South Carolina, and opened their eyes. This is one of the first things we did. There was another thing we did. Another exercise involved using history books to prepare how history is taught in other countries. The American group asked the participants from Ireland, Germany, Lithuania, and Poland to respond to this question. How do your history books portray the dropping of the atomic bombs on Japan to end World War II? Or at the end of World War II? The German group asked the other national groups, including the U.S., to investigate how their books describe the formation of the European Union. It was amazing to see the differences. Facts are facts and are presented as such, but the importance given to certain facts and the inclusion or omission of other facts is very interesting. How one country portrays something that took place, dates and location and things are pretty much the same, but what they put importance on, etc. In other words, in the American history books, the importance of the American involvement in the creation of the European Union was pretty virtually no one had anything, it's just that the Americans approved and went on. Trips outside Lambrecht included a visit with a lecture to an open mosque in Mannheim and a trip to Koblenz to visit to the Rhine area and the famous Deutsches Eck monument. In Berlin, the group heard from survivors of Stasi persecution, visited and talked with the leaders of an organization to help Turkish women integrate into German society. The trip to and the tour in the former Stasi, prison at Oeschenhausen is always striking and sobering. This is the former Soviet and then later Stasi prison at where they used psychological ways to, they couldn't use physical ways to convince people because they wanted to be accepted after 1949, the East Germans. So they started using these psychological. This gentleman, who was at Francis Marion, by the way, last April, he gave a mini concert and a talk, whom I met while I was in Berlin working at the conference, was invited to come to Penn State and a special side trip just to come to Florence and talk about his time when he was held 3 months. He's a physician. He was trained as an anesthetist in the German Democratic Republic, but went back and now is a working psychiatrist, working with people who've had stress because he was arrested and held 3 months by the Stasi because he sang and wrote songs they didn't like. So he knows a lot about things. So this brings us down to our final, you see the involvement I have with these. So this brings me to the final question. What does this involvement mean to the education in South Carolina and well, first, what were the goals of my sabbatical? Well, goal 1. I should, by my own experience, observe the daily functions of an academic unit such as the Atlantic Academy, which is called an academy in Germany, not university, not Fachhochschule. Such entities per se do not exist in the United States. Goal 2. I should collect, peruse, and analyze the literature produced by and about academies, and their programs, workshops, seminars, etc., in order to acquire an overall perspective of their history and their ongoing mission. 3, I should make and sustain contact with persons in leading positions in various organizations so that I could better understand how these organizations function alone, or is often the case, in tandem in order to attain common goals through active cooperation and open communication. Such may be able to serve as a model for cooperative education and international programs in South Carolina. Goal 4. I should offer as many South Carolina workshops as possible with the originally conceived goals in mind, but also with the intent that the citizens of the Brown College would gain a continual and steadily increasing interest in our region, state, and possible future exchange programs. Such programs should not only deal with politicians, scholars, and business people, that is a top-down partnership, but should also contain a bottom-up component. Goal 5, as an American, I should review the holdings of the considerable English language library at the Atlantic Academy in order to give a learned evaluation of which work would have true value for the readers there. And finally, Goal 6, as a guest professor from the United States and from South Carolina, I should present a lecture on the American Civil War at the conference on that war held April 7th and 8th, 2011 at the Palmetto State in Bangladesh. I should also attend and participate in all sessions of that seminar. And what were the results? Oh, administration and daily activities. Except for the days when I was conducting workshops at other locations, I spent several hours daily in the offices of the Atlantic Academy. I observed how the director interacted and functioned with his colleagues in such a way that the whole enterprise appeared to be an integrated collaboration, which is very important for such small units as the academies themselves tend to be. Because I had several matters to attend to that involved the Atlantic Academy, for example, my lecture at the seminar, I was invited to participate in the weekly staff meetings. Here I was able to experience the more intimate activities of an organization, and from time to time, even contribute something to the meeting. It also became clear to me how the different workers fulfill their tasks. Each has his own workstation with the necessary office equipment, both individual and collective, and each knows his work objective or project. I also learned that the Atlantic Academy receives its operational resources from the state of Rheinland-Pfalz and is financially dependent on the state. The Atlantic Academy is a registered organization. In Germany it's called Eingetragener Verein, within the state, which means it may legally function as a corporate body. Literature text in the library. Each academy possesses a corpus of literature, for example, brochures, informational tests, self-produced and self-published texts, in addition to extensive and well-organized libraries. Many of the directors and study coordinators themselves are authors or editors of texts, books, and articles. For example, Dr. Klett, Mr. Tunisman, and David Sirikov at the Atlantic Academy, and Mr. Martin Kaiser, the director of the Pfalz Academy, all have published and continue to publish and edit books and articles. To date, I've collected a considerable amount of brochures, documents, texts, etc., most of which I still have to analyze in detail. For 2 days, I reviewed the English holdings of the library at the Atlantic Academy. This library continues to receive books from various sources, schools, individuals, and significantly from the U.S. military. In Kaiserslautern, they call Kaiserslautern the American city. They have one of these in German and one of these in English. This is an English copy. We have 55,000 Americans still living in and around Kaiserslautern today. Even though there's a much reduced military presence there. For personal and professional contacts. During my visit to Rheinland-Pfalz, I spoke with several individuals, and often it turned out that these people had requested a meeting with me. Within the Atlantic Academy, I conducted lengthy conversations with all the colleagues concerning various matters within the operations of the Academy, from the director to the interns. With Martin Kaiser, the director of the Pfalz Academy, I had a meeting of several hours in which we talked about the academy system in Germany since the end of World War II. I also made contact with Mr. Larry Zanning, the president of the American-German Business Club in Kaiserslautern, where I also got to hear a lecture on the Berlin airlift at that very same meeting. On Wednesday, April 9th, I had an interview with Mrs. Hine from the newspaper, the Rheinpfalz. Frau Hine was also present at the next South Carolina workshop, where she made several photos. On April 13, 2011, an article appeared in that newspaper about the workshops and the associated activities. On April 16th, Mr. Tunisman and I met with Mrs. Gudrun Vesting, the chairperson for youth work for the German American and International Women's Club of Kaiserslautern, and with her colleague. Our topic of discussions dealt primarily with the possible short-term exchange programs between high school-age students in Rheinland-Pfalz and South Carolina, especially students between the ages of 14 and 18 years of age. We also discussed possible visits between adult groups who share interests. For example, hobby gardeners, golf players, etc. Of special significance were the 2 meetings that I had with Mr. Wolf Schumann, a doctoral candidate at the University of Koblenz-Landau and leader of the organization Transatlantic Partners, a group which maintains a close relationship, at least electronically, with the United States and with South Carolina in particular. At the first meeting, we discussed the mutual position of the Transatlantic Partners to South Carolina and how we could develop realistically feasible projects in the near future. At the second meeting, the entire Transatlantic Partners team was there. Very specific ideas and concepts were discussed. My English language blog, also in German, now appears monthly on the website of the Transatlantic Partners. That's the thing on the blog page, and that's the thing down there. You can just put in Transatlantic Partners, and it'll bring you up to several things, but you can find more there. I also conducted various workshops. On April 1st, I was in March the 30th, I was in Alzey, had 18 participants. April 1st, I was in Neustadt, 45 participants. April 4th, Landau, 21 participants. April 11th, I was 2 places in Mainz that day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, 21 and 17 participants respectively. April 12th, I was in Westerbork, way up in the north, 83 participants at that workshop. April 13th, I was back in Mainz, 35 participants. April 14th, I was in Idar-Oberstein with 32 participants. And on April 15th, I was in Bad Neuenauf, back up in the north of the state, with 83 more. I had 10 workshops, 2 one day in Mainz, with a total participant count of 359 participants, including faculty. And on April 7, 2011, I presented a lecture entitled Remembrances of the American Civil War from a Modern Perspective of an American Southerner in English for the participants at the seminar on the American Civil War sponsored by the Academy. This was the title page. I actually gave it a nice little French title. La Chance du Patriots, in search of things past, as Marcel Proust. They wanted this, and they found it very, very interesting that people, for example, in Oregon, they know about the Civil War, but they're not. I can show them several things just here in South Carolina, our National Cemetery, our cute little Civil War Between the States Museum. If you go in there, anybody been in there? Anybody been in that little museum? Don't say Civil War if you go in there. Don't say Civil War. This guy is a die-hard states, war between the states thing. It's an interesting little museum. It really is a surprise. It's really interesting. So if you can get past that, also the stockade, and show them the photos of the models and things like that. And they were quite surprised that we had just that much just in Florence, South Carolina. And also, of course, the other things that were attending that. But that was the title page that I used there. The conference participants were largely educators in bilingual schools in Rheinland-Pfalz and in Hessen. It's the state next door. Since most teach history in English, they requested a native speaker of English for one such presentation. However, the conference language was German, and all of the presentations were from university faculty as well and in German. The 150th anniversary of the beginning of the American Civil War was a chief motivator for this seminar, which was scheduled to be held in the same month as the bombardment of Fort Sumter in 1861. So I have some, by the way, this is just a quick picture of, this is my Anita Oberstein. This is how I presented it. You can see that I'm talking up here about the National Cemetery, actually in Florence, because they wanted the Civil War there as well. This is how it was usually performed. Well, one of the interesting things I did also, I asked them to get out, do an activity, get a piece of paper, write down 5 things that that you think about when you think about the United States of America, not South Carolina, but the United States of America. And I said, you can't insult it. You can write down anything you want to. You won't be insulted. And don't try to write down what somebody else has. Put your own thoughts. And then they would put theirs together. And I said, at the very first one of these things I had, when I was talking about South Carolina, the United States, they put down the thoughts, and so they had everything. And I had 4 different groups. Okay, we had 33 participants. I think I had 6 or 7 in each group, something like that. Maybe 8. And they were scattered around, and so group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4 had come up with their own lists. And so I said, okay, group 1, what did you come up with? Number 1 in the United States said, only thing about now, fast food and fat people. I wrote that up on it. Group 2, what do you have? Fast food and fat people. Group 3, what do you have? Fast food and fat people. You don't want to guess what number 4 had? I'm not lying. Fast food and fat people. All 4 groups. And you know what I said about that? Oh, yeah? Really? Globalization. I told him I was pregnant. I was going to name it Kustowitz, my favorite black beer. Again, I try to keep it kind of light for them because I go 4 hours of this. We get breaks, we get lunch, it's okay. And finally, don't you just love those words when somebody's saying, in conclusion. As a professor of German, whose main task is the instruction of German language and culture, I must state that the daily interaction with my very helpful colleagues at the Atlantic Academy and with the representatives of the other institutions with whom I had contact, as well as with the citizens of Kaiserslautern and Rheinland-Pfalz, has immeasurably extended and mostly improved my skills in the German language and ability to relate to modern German culture and lifestyle in the classroom and bring it to the classroom at FMU. Riding the bus, that's the bus that I rode. Using the often frustrating coin-operated laundry, that's the real coin-operated laundry that I would go to every Saturday morning, have a little tray of things, the old people used to, an old guy used to. Chatting with my landlady. She was often out sunning herself, and I'd come by and have a little chat with her from day to day. And yes, even quaffing a Guinness ale while watching soccer at Thirsty Nelly's in the Altstadt. Everything was for me a totally new experience that I'll never forget and appreciate at the highest level. Thank you for putting up with me, and I have some things you can peruse if they were connected with me. Thanks very much.